Greetings. I have to squint a little bit because it's just bright today. And today's transmission is going to be on something I'm sure that you're experiencing right now. And the topic is going to be on relationships and why are they broken? Why do they no longer work? Why don't they work anymore? You know, the world was so vastly different just a handful of years ago, wasn't it? Back in 2015, 16, 2019. But something happened in 2020. I think we know what that is. And I've said it before in past videos, but the masking of people creates a phenomenon that triggers the reptilian brain to become hostile. Because when we're using just this is predatory, okay? Predatory. Eyes are predatory. It's neocortex. Yeah, it reminds me of the archetype nerd with the glasses and sweatshirt on that's a psychopath. I don't have to tell you who that is because you can put two and two together. And the issue here is what's happening. Here's an example. There's a guy who's very, very famous, and he has a alpha male type following, and he tries to predominantly teach young men how to level up and become financially successful, diss on women, etc. And then you look and you see videos of him actually beating women on the internet, like horrifically, and evidence after evidence after evidence that this person just maliciously has an intent to harm everything that comes in his path. And that's the true nature of this person, because that's what he even admits to, right? So why would people follow that? And then it brings you to this ultimate secret that everybody's looking for somebody that's channeling the energy of what they're going through, all right? And so he channels this intense anger, this rage, and the world predominantly feels this. It's all suppressed and collected because of the massive psyop that took place all over the world that essentially, you could say it threw the world off its axis, but what it did was it introduced a barrier within human relationships and communication. It set up a disconnect that became conditioned, and it's just like any other conditioned response. Once you're conditioned in a certain way of being long enough, it just becomes a habit that you just stick to and stick to and stick to. Social media, social engineering has also steered everybody into a dopamine fix. Nobody wants to put the work in anymore. Essentially, what is relationships? Well, it's giving of yourself. And why would you want to do that if you can just get an instant dopamine fix on social media? Or I can just have some sugar, or I can, have a drug, or I can do whatever. Why would I want to put in the time and effort? It's not worth it. And what's it going to lead to? It's going to lead to more pain, more suffering. So what does that do? It triggers, again, the reptilian brain. Well, I'm not going to pursue this relationship. It's just going to cause pain and suffering. So then the other day, I'm watching this female who's very intelligent, apparently, because she said something massively profound and said, why do good guys finish last? Maybe you're a good guy. Maybe you're wondering, why are you not experiencing this wonderful, loving, committed relationship that you thought you were supposed to have when you were doing all the right things, right? And she said, good guys finish last because most of these men that they've been with have treated them so badly, violent, abusive, these type of control. See, these are mostly powerless men, because men that are powerless, they have to try to over-dominate the other person because they're powerless. They don't understand spiritual principles. They're ignorant. They're primitive. They're like barbarian type cavemen in the modern day. And so they leave this imprint on the psyche of the individual, and oftentimes it comes from their parents all the way down, so they unconsciously are seeking to recreate that relationship, because people don't know what they like what they know. People like what they know, what they're used to. And so along comes a good one that wants to love and take care of this woman, etc., and she finds herself wondering, well, why would he really want me? Like, it's too awkward. They can't accept it. They can't receive that type of love. So what they do is they look for anything that they can grab onto, because holy moly, this is dangerous. Those other guys, that's what I know. And so the reptilian brain says, because that's what I know, that's why I survived. So the reptilian brain, it's ultimately not very smart. So it says, because they beat me, they abused me, they treated me like crap, I'm still here. That means survival. That's the logic of the reptilian brain. And that's why human governments are still at work and in operation today, and people collectively believe in them as a whole, because it's just a carefully held belief. Because what do they call that? Stockholm syndrome, right? People sympathize with their abuser because their unconscious mind says, well, I'm still alive, so that must have been what kept me alive. And then along comes somebody who doesn't abuse them, who loves them and treats them well. This is why they hung Jesus on a cross. You ever wonder why they did that? Because he must be really, really bad. The one that actually loves you, that is a dangerous person, because that person is bad. And they start to look for anything they can find and build the strongest case ever. And then they will magnify that thing out of all proportion and then come down on that person. And that's why good men finish last. So you're wondering, well, what do I do then? Because I'm not an evil person. I'm not violent. I won't abuse my partner. I'm not going to play these games. Well, you have a couple options. You can just become like the MGTOW movement, men going their own way. You can just ignore them altogether and just leave the scene altogether. You can go to a different country. You can tap into different cultures where they have a different culture code. You can try that. Or you can just go to the Word of God and you can say, well, God, I need an out here. Because everybody's spirit, it's not just the men and the women and the women and the men. The women are going through stuff too, right? How many conversations a day does your committed male partner have with different people on social media, right? With women, right? And you're thinking every time that happens, you know that men and women can't realistically have a really close relationship and not be attracted to each other at some point, right? Well, they can, but the likelihood of that being the case in most scenarios is just a cop-out alibi that's being told so that the person can get away with doing what they're doing. And you know that, and they know that. And then you have the culture code in the U.S. that Clotaire Reply discovered, and he says the culture code in the U.S. that if you want somebody to love you, it's false expectation equals love. So what does that mean? It means you feed them a bunch of garbage and you lie to them and they fall in love with you. There you go. So put the two and two, put all the pieces together, and you could say, man, this sucks. And it really does suck. This is the culture that's been created. This is a cult. They created a big giant cult, and the reason why, first principle, is to destroy the family unit. Because if they can destroy the relating, okay, and the structure of the family unit, then the state becomes the daddy. The government becomes daddy. And in order to have a one world government, they got to destroy it. Because they want government and then slaves. And if you don't see that, then you're just obviously not paying attention. But see, that's not new. And so you wonder, like, well, it's not new. It's been around since the beginning of time. It's always been kings and serfs, rulers and slaves. It's always been this dynamic. What do we do with this? Is there an answer? So when I want to get an answer, and this is the first time I'm asking this question because it's been on my heart lately. I didn't even do this without you present here. This is where I'm going to go, and I'm going to open it up and say, God, do you have an answer? And if so, what do you do? Because like you, it's been a struggle with relationships, just for me as well. It's been difficult. And I get to the point where I wonder, maybe I'll just completely not do it anymore. Not ever again. Just completely just relate with God and just enjoy my life and do my own thing. But I wonder, is that really what God says? So let's just check it out. I opened up right here to Proverbs chapter 14. Now again, I just randomly do this, and this is how God speaks to me. And he's probably going to speak to you if you're wondering about relationships. He says, "Every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish plucketh it down with her hands. He that walketh in his uprightness feareth the Lord, but he that is perverse in his ways despiseth him. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them." Those 3 verses right there we're going to look at, because I believe that we've come to the conclusion of what we need to know here. So my asking, and I'm going to bookmark this because I'm going to have to come back to this later and meditate on it. And I suggest maybe you do that too. If you get a word of God, meditate on it later when you get time. Try to sink it as deep into your heart as you possibly can. So I came to God saying, okay, I've ciphered through all the code and all the things happening in the world and the reason why relationships are essentially broken. Tell me what to do, Father. And so God is saying to me right now, and maybe to you as well, every wise woman buildeth her house, but the foolish pluck it down with her hands. Now we have to look at that and say, okay, how could she pluck it down with her hands? That means her works, like the things she's doing. But it says the wise woman builds her house. What is her house? Is it literally her material home? Or is it talking about a different house? Could it be her consciousness? You know, the thing that houses us is consciousness itself. So consciousness is the house. And the woman represents the material creation. It also represents, birth, giving birth to ideas, things that are coming into the material creation. So we have a house and we have something coming into the material creation. Okay? Now it says that the wise woman builds her house, and the foolish plucks it down with her hands. So the hands is her power. So to build our consciousness, what does it say in the next verse? He that walketh in his uprightness feareth the Lord, but he that is perverse in his ways despiseth him. Now that word perverse is a really telling word, since my question was about relationships. Have you not seen morality decline to basically zero? Like immorality is the cultural norm. Today we put up with so much immorality that it's even worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. We are in ultimately what I think is just pure ugliness in terms of morality. It's just filth. The music, trash. All it does is just exploit it left and right. It is, if there was a definition of perverse, and they had a fortune teller back in the 1500s when they were trying to make the etymology, whatever, they'd probably look out to the year 2020 through 2025 and say, look at this music. Here it is. Boom. They pop it right in front of you. Because what does that do? A muse is something that moves you from one state to another, and it's how you build your house. A muse is how you build your house. Your consciousness is built through moving from one state to another. So when we make a state change and we move from immorality, which is fearing the Lord, which is uprightness is morality, okay? Verse 2. So if we are in morality, which means to see the world as God sees it and see the purity in mind. So we don't lust for the things of the carnal flesh as the world pictures keep throwing at us. We see the beauty and the perfection and the holiness of that which is good in the sight of the Lord. We see the qualities of God. We see, oh, that's not a piece of tail over there. That's the expression of love and kindness and gentleness and joy. I'm attracted to that. I'm attracted to joy. I'm attracted to love. I'm attracted to kindness. That's what excites me. That's the thing I'm looking for in the world. I'm looking to get in a relationship with that. Now, the opposite, the perverse way, is instead of looking for that in a mate, in a partner, we look for, well, I'm going to make sure he's got a lot of money. He better have a lot of social status. She better have, a nice body. She better be like a 10. You see, we start to look at these things. This is the perverseness right here. That's what it's talking about. In the mouth of the foolish is a rod of pride, but the lips of the wise shall preserve them. So pride is arrogance. So pride is a really destructive thing. And pride is so easy to fall into. I've fallen into it so many times, and I have to always remember, if I think I'm doing it, I'm already in pride. It's already crossed the boundary. I've already stepped over my authority. If I think it's because I did something to make it happen and I take the credit for it, and then I want to exalt myself in any way, I have already stepped over that boundary of pride. Out of the mouth of the fool is pride. Well, what did Facebook begin doing in 2009? Face. It was your face. You wanted to see yourself. You wanted to glorify yourself. Look at how great and how lovely our family is. We're all traveling to all the best places in the world. Look at how, and now we see so much of it where everybody wants to look a certain way. They want to appear to you as something because it makes them feel just a little bit above you. Now, ironically, I teach my kids the opposite. I don't know if it's relevant for what you do as a parent, but as a parent myself, I teach my kids to psychologically live beneath everybody else. And this is what I try to do as well. I try to psychologically live beneath others. I want them to think that they have more than me, that they are more than me. I want them to think this, because when I'm flying in this realm right here, underneath them, they're up here in the turbulence where all the competition and the friction is going on. And I'm down here just basking in the humility. Because in the humility, God exalts. You see, that's really what it's all about, is God is sharing with me, here's the summation of it. In our utmost humility, God will exalt us in relationship with Him. What has happened in the world, because everything is relationship with Him, is that the perverse woman, which is the material world, okay, perverse, and all of its images, its graven images, and its distorted, immoral culture, you could say it's infected the minds of virtually everybody. But it's by their own choice that they stay in it. And as long as they stay in it, and as long as they're out there looking for the next piece of tail that looks like a 10, or they want to get that one up and find a new baby daddy so they can get that extra income check off that guy, or they want to, they want to level up their game and become better than the next person so their social status can be just a little higher, they're going in the exact 180-degree wrong direction. Because the higher man exalts himself in pride, the harder the fall is. Not only that, but the ignorance that is spread from that consciousness is a boomerang that comes back through the tough experiences. So all of these so-called alpha teachers out here that are trying to get everybody all haughty and puffed up, well, most of them are openly admitting to taking advantage, exit liquidating their audience, rug pulling them, dumping on them, laughing about this. But that's one thing, but woe unto their audience who willfully pursues that. Because why would you pursue that which has nothing to offer you? The secret to life is, from my discovery, what I've learned, and I've done it both ways, so I understand, is to psychologically come in below others. And as you do that, well, it reminds me of a story I heard about a best-selling author. He said, and this guy was a very wealthy author, he said that he would clothe himself as a homeless person, and he would go into very rich neighborhoods, and he would just let the response of how they reacted to him. He would never stand up for himself, ever. They would treat him a certain way. Some people were kind. Some people would belittle him. Some people were horrendous. But he said he used to let them play the whole thing out because it became the best content for him to write his stories. So he literally transmuted that energy into his wealth. And that's exactly what you do when you psychologically live below others. You let them dress better than you. Let them look better than you. Let them talk more eloquently than you. In fact, just let them talk most of the time. Don't say much. And if you remain very, very, very humble, the human mind says, well, this is vulnerable. I can't do that. I could be predatorily attacked. People won't think very much of me. The truth is that it's not about people. It's about your relationship with God. As you soar in toward humility, and as you allow for humility to bring you closer to God through the non-judgment and just letting be whatever they're going to be, just let them be. Let them be what they're going to be. You can transmute all that energy and bring it into your success too. It's like you absorb it like a sponge, and then when life squeezes you, out comes more abundance for you. That's exactly what it happens if you'll do this. At first, it feels very awkward. But see, this is what surrendering your ego is. This is how you surrender. You let the other person take the win. You let them be better than you in their mind. You let them have more than you in their mind. You let them think a certain way, and it also reveals who the true people are in your life. In other words, it reveals where God actually is blessing you, so that you're not hoodwinked left and right by the next rug pull. This is a secret. And you combine this with my last video about how I told you to take everything and do it at half speed. And you will see a completely different world open up for you. And God will reveal himself strong on your behalf. So the first step was to take everything and slow it down to half speed. And I talked about that in the last video. You should watch that last video I put out. Because as you defy the world system and you go at half speed, you start to slow down and you can hear the voice of truth. That's what they don't want you to have. They don't want you to hear the voice of truth. That's why they're speeding it all up on you. Distract, 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 distract. Slow it down to half speed and just listen. The voice within, that's God. God speaks to you all day long. All God did in the Bible was speak. He's still speaking to you all day long from within. So now you start listening to the voice of God. Now you psychologically drop below the radar underneath your colleagues. You let them assume the dominant, I have more than this person, I'm more successful, I'm more this, I'm more that. It not only does it make them feel really good about themselves, it also exposes where God is actually blessing you. Because the ones that really are kind to you, the ones that are loving to you, the ones that are gentle to you, you see, isn't that full circle what we were looking for when we were saying what relationships are supposed to be? It's not the lust. It's not the perverseness. This is the actual uprightness that feareth the Lord. That's relating right there. So an example of that would be, and this happened in my life, and I could say, well, our relationship, it ends, right? It just falls out. And in that immediate moment, if I had been obsessing about this so-called relationship, like, oh, I need this, I gotta have this, right? I would have missed the real blessing that was taking place. What was taking place, was my teenage daughter, who is 14, had been reaching for a long time. She really wanted to connect with me. She wants to do things together. She wants to travel together. She wants to bond. It's a critical time in her life. And I saw that this is God right here relating with me. And what is this? Is gentleness. This is love. This is everything that relating is in its pure form. And you see, when you start doing these things, you'll start to find out, where is God blessing you now? You've defied the world system in all of its strongholds over you. And now it can't grip itself to you with all of its lust-seeking perverseness. And what actually begins happening is you begin relating with God in the way that He wants you to relate. And you start taking His directive. And you start having a calling where He's leading you, not your flesh leading you to the next divorce or the next fallout or the next beating that's going to happen. And all of these patterns that keep going on and on and on because you're attracted to all the wrong things. Because they will keep going on and on as long as you're attracted to all the wrong things. And that's what it said in those 3 scriptures right there. It's pretty interesting how that works out.